Soldier Stories podcast here. And before we get started, Doctor, I would just like for you to introduce who you are and what it is that you do, before we get this thing going.
Yeah, sure. So, to give people a little bit of background about myself, I'm a licensed clinical and prescribing psychologist. I have been working for the FBI as I've come to become the FBI's sleep guru or the sleep expert.
Right.
For the past like 5 or 6 years now, I do lots of different things. So sleep and trauma are my specialties, but it seems like there is no shortage of people who are struggling with sleep, who need help with sleep. And so that has just grown in popularity. And because of that, I have written a book. It's coming out on October 1st, 2025. And so I decided, well, you better get out there and start marketing it and let somebody know that you've written a book. So
Mm.
that's what I'm up to right now, is just trying to get the word out on podcasts, on social media, and to start to hype up the book that's coming out on October
Look,
1st.
and what's the book called?
Right now, it is the Sleep Advantage. That's what we're working with.
Okay, that's what
Yeah,
that's what it is right now. Okay.
that's
Uh
what it is.
Dr. Leah, uh I just want to ask this question though. You work for the FBI, is
Mhm.
that correct? Why would they need a sleep expert?
Well, so let me say this is that everything that I'm going to share here today are my own thoughts, feelings, opinions, beliefs, and this podcast is not sponsored nor endorsed by the
Right.
FBI. Um, and it's not that I was hired as a sleep expert, because that's certainly not my title, even though I kind of wish it was. That would be really cool.
That would be
I
actually, yeah.
I wish that that was my title, but that's not my title. My title is actually very boring. They hired a psychologist, and what they got was just someone who I can do lots of different things in mental health. Lots of different things do come in my office, and trauma had been my specialty and what I always thought it was going to be. But previous to coming to the FBI, I was at the Memphis VA Medical Center working in their sleep clinic. And that's just where I got a chance to really see a lot of people struggling with insomnia, with nightmares, with just general sleep hygiene issues, with struggling to wear their CPAP machine. So I got a chance to really take a deep dive and understand how many people were struggling, and also got the opportunity to learn myself, because I feel like sleep is kind of mysterious. Like, we do it every night. Everybody has to sleep, but I think that we don't
Mhm.
have a great idea of what actually happens when we sleep. So I was kind of forced to learn that and take that on, and it just became a fascination for me, and something that I feel like, again, touches everyone, which is kind of a rare thing to find a topic that touches everyone. So whenever I came to the FBI, it was kind of like, so what's going to be your thing? And I said, well, how about sleep? Because everybody sleeps. Everybody can relate to having a poor night's sleep. And when it comes to having a crappy night's sleep, I don't think there's this stigma associated with it if you came forward and said, well, I have depression, or I have anxiety, or I'm struggling with trauma. I think when it comes to having a poor night's sleep, everybody has been there and everybody gets it.
Mhm. And as an employee of the FBI, I want to ask this too. Is there any correlation between a lack of sleep and criminal behavior?
Oh, that's a good question that I haven't come across, but I should clarify that the people that I am serving are our agents, our professional staff, and our task force officers. So, I think that there's a lot of movies and television, and you know, whenever you see a psychologist, it's more outward facing and it's more in prisons and things like that. And that is not what my position is within the FBI. So, to answer your question, I don't have any data on that. So I can't say one way or another.
Sure.
However, if we kind of zoom out and we think about what happens when we're not sleeping right. So let's just say, for example, that someone hasn't slept in 24 hours, which I think we've all been there. If you've been in school, or you have a project that needs to be done, if you need a deadline, you've probably stayed up at least 24 hours. And so what the research tells us, and this is information from the CDC, is that if you've been awake for over 24 hours, you are operating like you have a blood alcohol level of zero point 0.1. So even though maybe you haven't had any alcohol, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but you are behaving as though you're over the legal limit. So just to give that context, in most states, 0.08 is over the legal limit. So when you've been awake for over 24 hours, 0.1% blood alcohol level equivalent. So whenever we've had a couple drinks. Normally, we aren't making great decisions. We're not thinking well. We are maybe a little bit confused. And then also thinking about the more time that passes just beyond 24 hours, the person becomes sleepier and sleepier. So they're only going to become more impaired. And that's also something that I think is really important that we don't really put two and two together, right? Like whenever it comes to someone being sleepy and continuing to stay awake for whatever the reason, if it's a mission, if it's being awake for your shift, whatever the case may be,
Mm,
the longer that you are awake, the worse your symptoms become.
sure.
Conversely, if you actually were inebriated, you would start to sober up. You would eventually start doing better. But when you're sleepy and you continue to stay awake, you're only going to keep doing worse. So, and that's also, we use sleep deprivation as a torture technique. So, to go back to your original question of criminal behavior being related to sleep deprivation, I don't have any specific research off the top of my head to be able to tell you that. However, I do think that when people aren't sleeping, that
Mhm.
they are not functioning at their best. We can at least say that much.
Correct.
And thinking and decision making are going to be impaired.
Indeed, indeed. So with your agents, what treatment do you use to help them with their lack of sleep or, performance?
Yeah, I do a ton of psychoeducation, which is kind of what we're doing here, is just giving people information about sleep. I
Mm-hmm.
use a lot of CBTI, which stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia, and
Mm-hmm.
that is very, very well known treatment within the sleep world as far as helping people get to a place where they're sleeping better. So lots of different techniques. And then also I have a excellent tool in my back pocket for nightmares called imagery rehearsal therapy. And that is a fabulous tool for people who are experiencing the same nightmare over and over again. It's a wonderful, very effective tool. So those would be the few that I really pull out often. And then I would say mental health and sleep are so incredibly tied together. And then whenever we think about military veterans, first responders, law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
trauma goes hand in hand with that. So I get so many referrals from colleagues of like, hey, Dr. Leah, can you take this person? They're
Mm-hmm.
struggling with sleep issues. And I see them for the first time, we're just meeting. And then it's like, oh, it's looking like a sleep issue, but it's actually untreated anxiety, depression, unprocessed trauma that's
Mm-hmm.
showing up at night as a sleep issue when, in fact, I don't want to say it isn't a sleep issue, but maybe it's coming at both ends. It's the chicken or the egg, right? It is
Yeah.
untreated mental health issues, poor
Yeah.
sleep, and it just keeps going and going and going.
Indeed, indeed. And I know we talked about in our initial interview, we talked about that veterans piece. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like you to go over that again because I found that very intriguing because I'm a veteran, and
Yes.
as a veteran that suffers, from PTSD, I had sleep deprivation, so to speak, because
Yeah.
of the trauma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So uh, can you talk about your experiences to the viewers? Can you talk about your experiences of working with the Vietnam vets that you said that you
Yes.
had some exposure with?
Yes. So I don't know if it was Memphis or if it was the time that I was there or what, but I saw
I think it was in
that
Memphis.
was that was a huge population of what I saw was I had a ton of Vietnam veterans and it had been decades later and I'm seeing these folks at the VA and the unprocessed trauma that they're still carrying was unbelievable. These folks, they had probably gone away when they were very young men, fresh
Mm,
out of high school and going away and doing all the things that they were asked to do, and then coming home and thinking that they were going to be lauded as heroes, and that's not what happened at all. And I think that that also plays into some like moral injury, and that's kind of it's a whole nother piece. But all the types of things that we ask, whether it's our veterans or active duty military, first responders, we ask people to see and to do a lot of things that the human beings should not see and do. And so whenever we have a trauma reaction, we need to reframe it as a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Like we should not be asking people to do all kinds of things that we ask folks to do. So what happens when we sleep is that what the brain is attempting to do is to try and process the things that have happened to us, whether it's from that day or whether it's from a long time ago. And for my Vietnam veterans, they're kind of stuck in this almost like broken record of a loop of trying to process something and it's just not getting fully processed. And that's when sleep can do its job. What happens is it helps take memories that are painful or emotional or traumatic and kind of do a little bit of an emotional detox and kind of take the sting out of the nightmare or the memory, so it becomes a little bit more neutral and it can kind of go back in the memory filing cabinet where it belongs. But
Mhm.
with with this unprocessed trauma, and the longer that we're not sleeping well, again, it's just this cycle of poor sleep, poor mental health, poor sleep, poor mental health. And what I suggest, and I'm very grateful that I have specialties in both trauma and sleep, is that helping people improve their sleep with lots of different techniques. We also have techniques to help with nightmares, but also helping people on the other end process their trauma in the daytime. So I'm certified in EMDR and brain spotting. So those are techniques that I highly recommend for folks. But we can talk about that. But I'll go ahead and pause and see where you want to go next.
Oh yeah, no problem. Uh, and I know you're somewhat pressed for time, so I'll respect that.
That's
Uh,
okay.
I know we also talked about in our initial conversation, you mentioned the phrase sleep avoidance.
Yeah, yeah. So
What's that? What does
without
that mean?
giving too much away, I will talk about someone in de-identified terms of when I was at the VA. I This was the first time I'd seen anything like this, and this is something that I'm so glad that I was introduced to because it is, I think it's important that we put a name to it. So sleep avoidance is whenever we are trying to avoid sleep for whatever reason. And so what I was seeing a lot within the veteran community would be folks who know that they're probably going to have a poor night's sleep, know that they're probably going to have nightmares, know, I think a lot of people are just used to having a poor night's sleep. So like, what's the point? It's going to be crappy anyways. And so I think people try and purposely avoid sleep. And I think that there's a big piece of fear of, I know that I'm going to go back to this place. I know that I'm going to have this nightmare again. And I would have, and I think that there's like safety components too. So the veteran that I'm thinking about in particular, we worked together and he was sleeping when we first started working together about 1 hour a night. Like incredible. Like I'm really not sure how someone continues to function on that level of sleep deprivation. And it was, I think, a combination of fear of going to bed, but also wanting to protect his family. That was a very big piece of it. So he would sleep, quote unquote, sleep in like a lazy boy. And it was more so that like sleep would overcome him, not that he was trying to sleep, but with a loaded gun because he was just so fearful of his safety, his family's safety. And it was just wrecking him as a person because we are not made to function like that. If you're getting anywhere less than 7 hours of sleep, according to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, that is sleep deprivation.
Mm.
And imagine
Oh, I
having
guess
one
that's
hour of
me
sleep.
then.
Say it again.
So I guess that's me then.
It's most people. A lot of people don't know that. Whenever I throw that out there, I think that it really surprises people. So I would say that a lot of people are deprived, and it's just think about having 1 hour of sleep a night and doing that night after night after night. And thank goodness we were connected and we did a lot of different techniques. And I think something that is important for me to say is good sleep doesn't happen overnight. Like it wasn't that we met once and he's cured. It was working together, trying lots of different things, and eventually like the strangest thing that kind of flipped the switch and got him to a place where he was sleeping better was having a fan on in the background and having some type of white noise. That was the thing that really helped him get to a place where he could start sleeping and sleeping regularly. But again, whenever it comes to our veteran and active duty populations, there is no shortage of just not having respect for sleep. Just last week, I was at the Human Performance and Biosystem Summit, and that's very high level military. And we have all these colonels and everyone talking about we have all these recruits and they're wearing these wearables and we're looking at the data and we're, measuring this and this. And, I'm one of the speakers in the lineup and I just kind of really broke it down as to if we're not sleeping, it doesn't matter how much you invest in nutrition and education and wearable devices and all these different things. Like you, that's money going down the toilet if you're not allowing people to sleep and you're not creating the conditions in which they can sleep and get good quality sleep.
Hmm. What what physical problems can people develop because, like, well, because for me, I remember being afraid to sleep
Mm-hmm.
when I was really going through my nightmare stage
Yeah.
and my night terror
Mm-hmm.
stages. uh I was afraid to go to sleep because I knew what was coming.
Exactly. And I think it's very important that your audience hears this from you because you've lived it. You know, we're on two different sides of the coin, right? Like you've lived it and I'm just relaying the experience of those who I've worked with. And so maybe it would be really useful to for you to tell your audience what that was like for you and what it looked like.
It looked like something out of the Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mm-hmm.
You know how they did everything they could to not fall asleep. Or for me, I used alcohol as a means to help
Yes.
me sleep.
Yes.
I don't know how common that was for you and the people that you dealt with, but I know for me that was kind of an outlet for me because I knew that I couldn't naturally fall asleep
Mm-hmm.
because I knew in my heart and in my mind that I was going to wake up screaming, yelling, and sweating profusely at some
Mm-hmm.
point in the night. I knew it, and I did every night. I
Mm-hmm.
woke up, panicked. I felt like I ran a marathon. I mean, my heart was pumping through my chest
Yeah.
every night, and I mean, I'm sweating, bed wet. You know, like what the hell's going on? You know,
Mm-hmm.
so I figured, well, if I drink myself to sleep, you know, I wouldn't know or even care. But even then, doctor, it still didn't help.
So in my book, I have a chapter called There's a Difference Between Sleeping and Passing Out. And I
Mm,
think that it's very important that we make a distinction as the two because there are so many people, veterans, military, first responders, who are using alcohol, even civilians, as a way to fall asleep. Yes, it will help you fall asleep. It is a depressant. It will sedate you. However, that sleep that you're getting because of alcohol
mm,
is going to be poor quality sleep. It's
mm,
going to be very fragmented. It's
mm,
not going to be that deep restorative sleep where your brain and body have the opportunity to do all of those very important functions compared to sleeping without alcohol. So, just to kind of dive even a little bit deeper into that, when we drink alcohol, yes, it makes us feel sleepy. Like people talk about having a nightcap. However, when it eventually gets down into the stomach and it starts to get broken down, a lot of alcohol is sugar. So then it kind of flips the switch and it's a stimulant. So the sleep is going to be very fragmented. You're going to be in a very light stage of sleep and you're going to be more easily woken up by things that maybe wouldn't if you hadn't had alcohol on board. So maybe sounds, light, things like that. You're just in a much more surface level sleep. Also, alcohol is going to dehydrate you
mm.
and it's going to act like a diuretic. So, whatever sleep you're getting, you're probably going to have to get up and use the restroom more than usual at night, which is also going to be very disruptive and challenging to fall back asleep after you use the bathroom. So, there's just a lot of different reasons why alcohol is not a good sleep aid, and yet it is the world's number one sleep aid. So,
Right.
it's a problem, but it
Yeah.
is a tool that a lot of people use.
Yeah. Yeah. And I realized that what I was doing wasn't working because now I was starting to become more dependent on that
Mm-hmm.
feeling,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily going to sleep, but that feeling of being comfortable.
Yeah. And that's something that we also need to address too, is if this becomes your nightly routine and you continue to keep doing this,
Mm,
okay, the body will want more
mm,
and
mm,
more and more. And
Now you got two problems.
Now you have two problems. Yes, exactly. And so we need to address it. We need to talk about the elephant in the room and know that this is a very big common issue for folks. And I think that that's why it's so important that we're having this conversation is if you're having nightmares like Mark is talking about, there are treatments that can help you. Imagery rehearsal therapy is one of them, and it's honestly quite an easy technique. Like if I and I can describe it here if you'd like me to, but
Yeah.
so easy that you'd be like, that works?
Yeah.
Really?
If you got a few minutes, share a quick
Yeah.
example. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I will give you an example again, de-identified of someone, of one of my Vietnam veterans who I worked with.
Hmm.
And just like you, he was having nightmares night after night after night. We got connected after he had gone to the emergency room several times because he was so worked up that he thought he was having a cardiac event in the middle of the night and he needed to go to the emergency room. And eventually, they realized, no, this is not a heart attack, this is your nightmares just on such an extreme level. So we meet in the sleep clinic, and he had worked on planes his whole life, his whole career. He had never been in a plane accident. However, his nightmares were manifesting as him being in a plane every night and something was going wrong and the plane would crash. That's how the nightmare would end every time, is that the plane is crashing. So, what happens with imagery rehearsal therapy is that we work together. So, hopefully, you're working with a mental health professional. And what happens is we start by just going over the dream so that your mental health professional can really understand what is this dream, what's happening, what are the recurrent themes, like take me there with you.
Mm.
Then, and I know that a lot of people it might be uncomfortable to do that. And once we do it once, that's really it. I just need to be on the same page as you.
Mm.
So the next stage is that we take that dream and we change the ending to something neutral or positive. That's what we do. So for this one, the example that I was giving is he's on the plane, things start to go haywire in this stream, and it's really important that the client determines what happens. So I can be there, I can give examples, I can give suggestions, but it really needs to be that person coming up with how they want the dream to end because it's going to be really important as we move forward. So
Mm.
maybe he figures out what the problem is and fixes it. Maybe he gets a parachute and jumps out the back like 007.
Mm.
Maybe, again, dreams are very fantastical and they don't have to follow the rules of reality. So maybe he sprouts wings and flies away from this plane that's going down. Like whatever speaks to the person, that's what we're going to go with.
Mhm.
And so he needs to change the dream in a way that's either neutral or positive. So once that person is happy with however they've changed the ending of the dream, then, and this is where I say it's very simple, but it does take time, the person should practice every day for 15 to 20 minutes in the daytime in like a private, quiet place where you can just have some time to yourself. And all we do is rehearse this new dream over and over and over again. That's what we do. So we're not practicing the old nightmare at all. Every time we're shifting into this new ending that we have agreed upon. And after doing this for such a period of time, eventually at night, the brain kind of gets tricked almost. So the nightmare will start out, but because the dream that we've been working on also starts out the same way, at some point we switch the tapes. And when the nightmare goes to happen, now the new dream with the neutral or positive ending takes over. And again, after practice, night after night after night, normally after a few weeks, if not a couple months, again, good sleep does not necessarily happen overnight. Incredible results. Like people will start sleeping throughout the night because there's no nightmare anymore. Like the brain will start to kind of just take over this new tape of this new different ending, and eventually people can sleep throughout the night. And it's incredible. It's life-changing for people who struggle with nightmares like that.
Indeed, indeed. How can people contact you, doctor?
Yeah, so I have a website, drleahkaylor.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm slowly building up my social media so you can find me on YouTube and TikTok, and I'm trying to do Instagram. So I'm trying to put out some quick hits of sleep knowledge for people. So those are the few ways that you can find me. And on October 1st of 2025, my book will be released, and you can read all about it.
All right. Be sure to send me a copy.
I will.
Dr. Leah Kaylor, thank you very much for taking the time out to speak with me and talk about your work. And I hope that your upcoming book will be a success, because I do believe that many people do need to be educated on what it is to get a good sleep.
Absolutely. I
Real
think that
or
I
real.
hope this book helps a lot of people. That's what I really want.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Leah, you go to your appointment and you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. You have a good one.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.